In this video, we explore the terrifying news that the EU is going to ban you from working on your older cars and perhaps even take them away and confiscate them to be scrapped.
Or at least that's what the internet has been saying, but we thought we'd take some time and do a little research this morning.
Yep.
There's a 100-page document on exactly what the directives are.
A thrilling read.
And there are also supporting documents as well, which
I've got a few little quotes here that we're going to pop up on the screen for you to see.
Plain English.
We will link to the document itself if you want to go and have a read of the thrilling 100-page document. But mostly we're here to try and cut through the clickbait nonsense, because there is sadly being much of it.
And just allay fears, because I think people see things on the internet and you take it as sort of gospel.
Yeah.
And it isn't really.
This is our watchdog. He's obviously keeping an eye on what's going on.
This is just bringing everybody into line with regards how end-of-life cars are dealt with.
Yeah.
And it's probably interesting to start with, what is an end-of-life car? How is that
even
defined?
before we go there, we need to clarify the major elephant in the room, which is that this is something being organised by the European Commission, which is part of the EU. And technically, we're not in the EU anymore. So it doesn't actually impact us here in the UK anyway. And I just find it astonishing there's been quite so many clickbaity headlines. And clickbaity headlines exist for a reason. They cause a response. You get angry, you click it. What is this? How does it affect me? And there's plenty of outlets, whether it be newspapers, YouTube channels, blogs, that don't necessarily know what they're talking about, but know that, that'll generate a good response. Let's make people angry. And that is why there is so much misinformation about out there. And we ultimately see the effects of misinformation all around the world. The reassuring arm is to make sure I don't get too political. We're going to do our best not to be political, but obviously just mentioning the EU itself upsets a lot of people.
It's going to get worse in a minute, because a lot of this directive is about recycling and regaining elements that would otherwise be lost. I don't mean the whole entire element. I mean as in, if they just go through the crushing process as it is, then all these materials will be lost. Whereas what they want to do is start to recoup more materials. For example, glass.
Yeah.
Cars are crushed with glass at the moment. They're looking to recoup 70% of the glass and reuse it.
All that plastic?
Yeah. Plastic again. Did they say something about they're aiming for 31% as a target for the plastics? Because the plastics aren't really rescued either. Also, this directive hasn't really been looked at with a view to electric cars. And there are lots of resources within electric cars. Oh my gosh, recycling electric cars in the EU. We're doomed on this one.
Yeah, we're doomed. We're mentioning all the bad things you should never mention.
But it's never really been talked about with regards to electric cars. And there are resources that are put into electric cars and precious materials that we need to recoup, and that's not really been considered before.
And that's primarily what this directive is about. We've spent hours and hours this morning reading a document that isn't concerned about me driving my older cars or you driving your older cars. That's not what they're interested in at all. What they want to do is make it easier to recycle cars, so put pressure on the manufacturers to make it easier to recycle the cars when they become end of life. This is something that's already going on. This is already happening. And then making it clearer what is an end of life vehicle. And I think that's probably where things have been picked up. It's a thing in the appendix. I will try and read out exactly what it says in the appendix. This is the criteria for assessment of repairability of vehicles. So a vehicle is technically irreparable if it meets one of the following
Economically irreparable.
No, this isn't economic.
Okay. You're going for the tiny print.
Yeah.
I can't see that.
This is if it meets one of the following criteria. It has been cut into pieces or stripped. Well, in that case, it's not really a car anymore. It has been welded up or closed by insulating foam. So there's a specific bit of bodgery they are targeting there, where see Matt Furious Driving for more on how other countries seem to use insulating foam as structural repairs. Looking at you, America. It has been completely burnt to the point where the engine compartment or passenger compartment is destroyed, so it's not really a car. It has been submerged in water to a level above the dashboard. Sadly, we see more and more of this sort of stuff going on.
Unfortunately.
But that exists already. A car will be written off in this country if it has been very badly submerged. And it hasn't even got to be that deep. It hasn't even got to be dashboard level. Or one of several of the following components cannot be repaired or replaced. And it talks about various things: tyres, wheels, suspension, seat fixings and joints, airbags, pretensioners, the vehicle's hull and chassis. But it's not saying if they're damaged, it's saying if they cannot be repaired. So usually you can. Your brakes are knackered, replace the brakes. The other one is if it has structural or safety components that have technical defects that are irreversible, and turn them non-replaceable, such as metal aging, multiple breaks in primers, or excessive perforating corrosion. And I can see some people thinking, well, I weld up cars. That is exactly what I do. And the bit that I find a little ambiguous is if its repair requires the replacement of the engine, gearbox, shell or chassis assembly, resulting in the loss of the vehicle's identity. And that hints at what's going on here. What they're trying to cut down on is dodgy people taking cars, taking the IDs off them and selling the bits elsewhere around the world.
Yeah, okay. It's really important to mention here that when we're talking about this, we're not talking about the UK specifically.
Oh, God,
so
no.
the UK is probably in a very, very good point with regards to scrapping of cars. I mean, we've been to Tanner Growth, they've talked us through their process, and it's very careful. You have to depollute the cars before they go anywhere. They send their engines off to somewhere else, and so on and so forth. This is the entirety of the EU that we're talking about, and there are going to be countries that aren't in the same position as we are.
Yeah.
And it seems that within the EU, there are millions of cars, end-of-life cars, that vanish.
Yes, we don't know where they go. I'm assuming
vanish.
Probably Africa, especially watching Itchy Boots driving around Africa at the moment. There's a lot of cars that probably have come from Europe and have gone over there.
But then, of course, listening to that is, you're talking major safety issues there. If you're sticking a car back together with...
But also, this is trying to clarify what is an end-of-life vehicle. And ultimately, the key thing is that the decision about whether it's an end-of-life vehicle or not remains with the owner of the vehicle. So we've got a quote here from Adalbert Jans, a European Commission spokesman. He told AFP in November that the goal of this new legislation is to provide a better framework for how we get rid of end-of-life vehicles in order to improve the way that they are collected, treated and recycled. Every owner remains the one to decide what he does with his vehicle. There is no talk of the EU being able to seize a vehicle and scrap it. So, confirmation.
There was a slight inference of that, and it was very slight. But if you read on, then you realise that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah.
When it was talking about, was it abandonment of vehicles? But anyway, there was something that slightly inferred that. But if you read on, you realise it isn't that at all. And
I can't find anything in any of the documents, any of the research I've done today that mentions anything about 15 years at all. I have no idea where this 15-year thing comes from. And obviously, it's of keen interest for me because all our vehicles are over 15 years old. I will just quickly interject, there is a definite exclusion for historic vehicles, but the FIVA, it's the Federation of International Vehicle Associations or something, in Europe is very firm, very strict on its definition of a historic vehicle, perhaps a bit too much. They don't really like things like engine swaps and that sort of thing. They think historic cars are cars that just come out every now and then and are pretty much museum pieces. That's an entirely separate issue. But all this scaremongering doesn't seem to be justified.
No, and it's interesting to note that when we talk about these disappeared cars, just to go back to that subject matter, if it is millions of end-of-life cars that are disappearing and living another life somewhere, the concern is that they are doing so in an unsafe and a polluting fashion because it may be they have high emissions, they may be polluting in other ways with leaks and whatnot.
Oil leaks.
So, and also what becomes of those end-of-life cars when they reach their second end of life? Those resources are probably lost. And they've mentioned that across the EU with these new processes, it could be billions of pounds saved or recouped from the resources. And also, with more process, hopefully comes more people, so more jobs within the sector. Because we listened to it started to read initially, and we thought, well, what becomes of scrapyards if you can't purchase a car from a scrapyard,
like our Pajero,
or parts? What happens to that industry?
But actually, the parts side of things is very interesting. This wants to help. What it wants to do is make it easier to track parts. So if you buy a part, you can tell where that car was broken, was it a legit place, and even what the chassis number was, so that everything becomes more traceable. Obviously, it's more admin. We know Europeans like a bit of bureaucracy, but they're trying to be helpful here. They're not trying to ban old cars from the road. They're actually trying to make it easier to repair older cars, which I think is a very different take to what a lot of people are assuming.
And I know I've mentioned it before, but the glass thing's quite mind-blowing. Never even thought of that.
Yeah.
You crush a car, the glass goes as well. Never
Yeah,
even
you're just
thought
scooping up
about
little
it.
And
And put them in the bin.
Yeah. So it is seeking
it's
to
been
benefit
very
a lot.
interesting.
This is another EU website. I'll put the link in the description below. And it says, as in other cases, these criteria are first targeting illegal operators who, for example, use stolen cars or pile up old used cars for the purposes of smuggling spare parts or used cars without proper identification. It is not to hinder legal activities by private owners or hobbyists of vintage cars. And this next bit is in bold. If a car needs a repair, any part may be changed as long as the vehicle is fit to pass the roadworthiness inspections and remains authorised to operate on the EU road. So effectively an MOT. Some cars, if you do more modifications, it has to go through a different approval process. But yeah, in particular, the proposed regulation does not prohibit the repair or replacement of the engine, gearbox, shell or chassis assembly of a vehicle. So, I mean, you can't get much more blatant than that. Specifically saying, just carry on doing what you're doing.
Yeah, you've already said
unless you're an illegal, dodgy company doing dodgy things with bits of cars.
You've already said with regards to the end of life, it mentions those things, the engine and so on and so forth. But it's just clarifying that you can still do those things. You can still do those things.
There is no intention to stop people fixing their own cars. And indeed, the EU has history of really helping out motorists. Things like the fact that car dealers used to say, oh, you've bought a Mercedes-Benz or any other manufacturer, I'm not picking on Mercedes-Benz deliberately, you must only get it serviced at a Mercedes-Benz dealer or you invalidate your warranty. The EU came in and went, no, that's anti-competition, you can't do that. So any VAT registered garage can carry out repairs and it won't void the warranty. So the EU isn't as anti-car as a lot of people tend to make out. I mean, there are concerns, there are bits of language like, ooh, that sounds like it could be a bit close to this horrible thing. But I think, if anything, it just proves that engagement with your MEPs is a good idea. Let them know what your thoughts are. And indeed, there's still a long way to go for this legislation. It's not approved yet. It's still got to get voted through. It might not happen, but really it is just an amendment to existing legislation. Yes. It does not change an awful lot for anybody.
Yeah, and it's also just bringing everybody into alignment. Obviously, I don't know how old the previous directives were, but it feels as though...
it kind of dates back to the 70s.
Well, exactly.
It's not
been
and I think the latest legislation is around 2006.
It's not been addressed in a very long time. And within the EU, there are lots of different countries in lots of different financial situations who operate in lots of different ways. Here in the UK, we're not that far off what they're anticipating, really.
No.
With regards how our scrap operatives work. Sorry, Diego's just put himself in his little mouse house. We're not that far from the directives with regards how our scrap yards work, how end-of-life cars are dealt with and so on. There's always fear when there's a directive. And there's always... The car industry feels like it's constantly under attack at the moment.
Well, even when I first started seeing this and started seeing some of the clickbaity nonsense, I'm starting to think, oh yeah, well, I guess they're trying to clean up emissions. They're trying to get us out of our older cars. But it doesn't look like that could be further from the truth, to be honest. It looks like they're, if anything, trying to help us. I mean, let's face it, most people are not driving around in 15-plus-year-old cars. The followers of this channel are probably a bit unique in that. But even
I was going to say,
even
everybody
followers
watching this probably is.
no, we're seeing it with Rustival. Even
no,
followers of
no,
this
no.
channel, people will tend to have a modern car anyway and just have the old car for a bit of fun. There aren't that many people deliberately going out their way to use 15, 20-year-old cars as daily transport.
Also, yeah, going back
because as we know, it's not always much fun.
Going back to Rustival, we have lots of modern cars coming. People are our followers and love classic cars.
Yeah.
And odd cars, but drive a modern, and they love their moderns, and I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's pretty much us done on this topic. We conclude there's nothing scary at all. But while we're talking Rustival, this is your last chance. Friday, is it Friday the 23rd? Is your last day to pre-order merchandise. I'm wearing a lovely hoodie at the moment in a slightly rusty colour.
And just to let you know, the patches are embroidered. They're really, I've just touched him casually.
Yeah.
They're embroidered. They're really, really nice.
So nice
we've got
quality
the rust hoodie. Have we got a black hoodie or rust hoodie? Just a rust hoodie. Rust hoodies.
Yeah. And t-shirts available in black or rusty.
Rust hoodies. And with regards to t-shirts, we have black and rust coloured t-shirts. The rust coloured t-shirts go up to 2XL and the black t-shirts go up to a 4XL. But yeah,
pre-order online, rustival.co.uk, and your merch will be waiting for you at the show. Yeah. Very exciting.
And while we were making this video, I've just seen a little thing ping up.
A little ping, yeah.
And it said there's 23 exhibitor spaces
and
left.
that's at the time of recording, so they may well have been snapped up by the time you see this video.
So that means
you will still be able to come to the show just as a general visitor if you fancy, and why not? We got loads of amazing guests coming.
Oh, it's going to be fun.
Loads of incredible cars, everything from pre-war to brand new, pretty much.
Yeah, and absolutely everything from pre-war to brand
everything
new.
in between. It's going to be amazing. So we hope to see you there.
Oh, we've got some exciting things. I'm so excited. The worst thing is I know, and I'm horrible at keeping things secret, so I keep wanting to blurt things. And
it's going to be good.
To.
We're not, no. But as that's done, there we go. Let's see, we don't think it's that scary at all. We don't think we're about to be banned from enjoying our older cars. And we look forward to seeing you at Rustival on the 9th of March if you're coming along.
Yeah.
So, farewell. We'll see you next time.
Bye.